this is Callimara here, and no, it's not calamari. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new to the pond, go ahead and take a dive. You might like it here. So, if you clicked on this video, then you're probably either a big fan of Greek mythology or Epic the Musical. Or maybe you just need a speed paint and background noise to draw to, and this popped up on your watch next and it auto-played before you could do anything about it. Either way, this video is for you. And hey, guess what? It is actually the 4th anniversary of my channel right now, which is kind of crazy that I've been doing this for 4 years. And I guess this channel is 4 years old now. Happy birthday, channel! So, the Ithaca saga is out. If you happen to be one of the people that stumbled upon this video having no idea what that is or what I'm talking about, I'm talking about Epic the Musical, a musical adaptation of Homer's The Odyssey by Jorge Rivera Herons that was originally posted and documented exclusively on TikTok. You know, that app that was banned for like a few hours in America before they decided, never mind, this is actually detrimental to our economy, so let's not do that. I say our like I'm American. I'm not. But anyway, it started getting traction on TikTok and then it gained traction on YouTube as well, thanks to the many talented artists that would go on to make amazing animatics for the songs that Jay has released that you should totally check out if you haven't already. And one thing that has become something of a favorite pastime among artists and fandom is interpreting the Greek gods with their own designs, be it just for illustrative purposes or for their own animatics. And that's something I also want to do. I've already done Apollo beforehand, so go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. The musical is broken up into several sagas following Odysseus' journey to get back to his kingdom and his wife Penelope. And it's a great time. Sometimes. Whether or not you actually follow the production, you've definitely heard at least 1 or 2 songs from the musical, especially if you're on TikTok. Anyway, with the Ithaca saga officially released, that means Epic the Musical is now complete. And hey, in case you didn't know, Jay and the entire cast of the musical actually went to Ithaca, Greece, to do their finale livestream. Sure, they pretty much had to go through their own odyssey to do it, but I hear it was a great time. I'm not jealous. So, perhaps it may surprise you to hear that I, in fact, have not listened to the entirety of the Ithaca saga or even the Epic the Musical discography. Because if you're new around here, you might know that I tend to have obsessive tendencies.
The friggin' leaf! And there's a very distinct lack of leaves to the leaves we see. I just did that and I saw myself in the camera and I'm like, maybe there is something wrong with me.
I can't just start a little bit and pace myself. No, I would finish it all in one sitting and not be able to think or do anything else until I do, and I need to squeeze what little productivity juice I have left in my 2 remaining brain cells to pass my exams. Oh god, not brain cells again. I've been learning about the nervous system and special senses for weeks. I'm having a really tough time, you guys, and from what I've heard and seen briefly on TikTok, the Ithaca saga will only give me a worse time. In a good way, but still a worse time. Okay, enough background information. Let's talk about why you're really here. Hermes! So, in case you guys didn't know, I was actually supposed to do both Apollo and Hermes in that previous video about Greek mythology because those 2 brothers have a lot of shared myths together and are pretty important to each other's lore. But I kind of ran out of time, so I had to pick one to focus on, and I already had a draft for an Apollo design and I knew more about him just through osmosis, so I left Hermes out of that video. But then, after that video, my life has certainly been interesting, to say the least. I don't know if it's just me losing my wits, but I've been encountering a lot of minor inconveniences at a noticeably increased frequency, from my shoes constantly undoing themselves as I'm running down the stairs because I'm late to class, constantly dropping things because my grip strength occasionally gets reduced to 0, forgetting and or losing things, spilling on myself on a semi-regular basis. Oh, and a whole ass rooster jumping the fence and breaking my glass door at 1 a.m. because he was being chased by this Missy, and I had to rescue it from being turned into chicken dinner.
This is a big crack. and it's here forever, unless I replace the whole glass.
In case you didn't know, roosters are one of Hermes' sacred animals. Honestly, my life lately feels like a trial of the gods from Hades, where you have to pick between the boons of two different gods, and whichever god you don't pick gets burned and makes your life complete hell. So, hopefully this appeases Hermes, because I did promise I'd give him his own video, and I have had enough of cosplaying a clumsy anime girl who can't go 5 minutes without tripping over herself. Now, all things considered, in Epic the Musical and the Odyssey in general, Hermes doesn't really have a very big role in the story compared to the other gods, like, say, Athena or Poseidon. He has an important role, of course. Odysseus would not have made it back to Ithaca without his help, but out of the entire discography, he really only has 2 appearances/songs, and both of them also happen to be my most played songs from Epic the Musical, but that's not relevant right now. Despite this, Hermes is possibly the most popular character in Epic the Musical, and it's not just because his songs are total bops. Aside from him already being a major god who has been worshipped for thousands of years in the actual Greek pantheon and referenced in various modern media, making him quite a familiar figure to us in modern times already, he also has his own series of skits in Epic the Musical called Hermes and Jay, which later expanded to Hermes and Zeus and Hermes and Ares when the crew got together for their Ithaca trip, where he essentially terrorizes Jay as he works on his musical. These skits really helped expand on Hermes' character beyond the songs he appears in, and with his charisma and comedic timing, he quickly became a fan favorite, which isn't surprising considering Troy, who is Hermes' voice actor and singer, is also the Hambone King, like from Victorious. That Hambone King that went up against Tori and Robbie? Yeah, that's Troy! Small world, huh? I highly recommend checking out some of these skits, which you can find on Jay and Troy's TikTok or YouTube shorts. But in general, who is Hermes? Well, Hermes is the son of Zeus and Maia, who is the goddess of fields, and the oldest of the Pleiades, aka the 7 daughters of Atlas and Pleione. He is described as a mischievous trickster god who had a great love of humans, and so aside from being the messenger and emissary of the gods for humans, he was also said to be extremely helpful and kind to humans in general, but particularly towards the Greek heroes and demigods. But that's exactly the kind of energy I wanted to capture with this pose I'm doing. Something casual, effortless, but oozing with confidence and a body language that screams, "Yeah, I know I'm hot, and I know you want me." Part of this was because Hermes was also noted to be rather promiscuous in nature, because he is also the god of sexy times. In other words, he was probably the ancient Greek version of an F-boy, and I'm not just saying that off of baseless assumptions, because in the myth of Pandora, when Hephaestus created Pandora, all the gods were giving her gifts. The gifts that Hermes gave her were lies, seductive words, and dubious character, and I think that's self-explanatory. Or maybe he's just a Gemini, so I wanted my portrayal to reflect that. Hey, fun fact, did you know that Hermes is also the god of astrology? And the zodiac sign he presides over specifically also happens to be Gemini, because it is ruled by Mercury, which is his Roman name / counterpart. So yeah, me and Hermes, we're like twins, Gemini twins, which is just 4 people. Also, is this pose heavily inspired by Jack Frost? Yes, and did I also have a crush on Hermes when I was young? Also yes, but that is not relevant right now. Honestly, Jack was a great reference for this because he also wields a staff, and it was the perfect way for me to incorporate the caduceus, which we will talk about more in depth later, because of course we have to talk about the caduceus. See, Hermes may be a messenger, but he's not just all talk. Or, well, he mostly is, but that yap of his gets him and a lot of other people out of all sorts of trouble. An aspect that I don't think gets talked about enough with Hermes, though, is that he's not just a trickster god or mischief maker. He's also incredibly cunning and clever, making him the god of problem solving on top of being extremely charming and eloquent. See, Hermes is also the god of linguistics and communication, and it's said that he could speak any language in the world, which makes sense because he's the messenger of the gods and also the god of mediation. So it'd be pretty important for him to be able to speak the languages of the people he's communicating with, which I guess would make him the patron of politicians and diplomats as well, and that makes a lot of sense because they're all lying bastards. Anyway, where am I going with this? This, of course, plays a huge role in why he's so popular and easily accepted in modern media. People like the charming, mischievous rebel with a heart of gold. If you've ever fancied a charismatic main character with a smart mouth, a lot of swagger, a lot of sass, and a laid-back, devil-may-care attitude, that's basically Hermes. I wouldn't know. But Hermes was traditionally depicted in archaic Greece as a matured, bearded man who dressed as a traveler, herald, and shepherd. His head and his, other head would often be depicted on the Hermai or Hermes, which is what I call him as a fun nickname. But they were basically road and grave markers hearkening to his role as both the god of travel and a psychopomp, which is a guide that leads deceased spirits to the underworld. However, in classical and Hellenistic Greece, Hermes was depicted as an athletic, beardless young man, and this is the depiction of Hermes I'm taking inspiration from. So I am also putting careful focus on his physique in general because while yes, all the Greek gods were stated to have impressive physiques, Hermes is also the god of athletes and athleticism, so it was important to me that his appearance reflected this because I think it also serves his portrayal and why he would have the confidence that he does. That's why for this secondary pose, I wanted to put him in a dynamic action pose that's going to show off his athleticism and freedom of movement while still carrying that swagger and mischief in his expression. Honestly, should there be a poster child for versatility, it would definitely be Hermes. Actually, I think Hermes probably has the most domains out of any Greek god of the Greek pantheon. Like, there's so many that I couldn't even name them all. So I let this guy list them instead.
Hermes is the god of a lot of things. In fact, I can't even name all. Actually, you know what? I'm going to name all the things that he's the god of. I got a whole list. Let's start with god of messages, god of mischief, god of travels, god of safe journeys, god of travelers, god of roads/crossroads, god of doorways, god of thieves, god of boundaries/borders, god of hospitality, god of luck, god of merchants, god of trade/business, god of commerce, god of athleticism, god of athletes, god of boxing, god of wrestling, god of speed, god of racing, god of gymnastics, god of sleep, god of dreams, god of astronomy, god of astrology, god of herds and cattle, god of shepherds, god of language, we're halfway through, god of writing, god of translation, god of interpretation, god of learning, god of eloquence, god of the alphabet, god of music, god of public speaking, god of wit, god of cunningness, god of mediation/diplomacy, god of fertility, god of sex, god of games, god of dice, god of gambling, god of agreements, god of friendships, god of data, god of unexpected wealth, god of immigration, god of immigrants, god of peace, god of tortoises, god of hares and rabbits, and god of social interactions. I sped right that. I bet there's more that I missed, but yeah, that's basically what he's the god of. He's also a psychopomp, meaning he guides the soul of the dead to the underworld. But yeah, that's everything he's the god of.
So fun fact, because Hermes is a psychopomp, it means he's considered both an Olympian and a chthonic god, which are gods that reside in the underworld, like Thanatos, Hades, and Charon. So yeah, he's a very busy guy. Or god, should say. But anyway, watch me struggle to draw his eyes. I don't know why or what it is about it, but I just can't seem to get his eyes right. Maybe I was leaning too feminine for Hermes because I've been drawing too much Apollo, and unlike Apollo, Hermes is portrayed as being more rugged and masculine in the traditional sense. After all, he's the god of travelers and thieves, which is why I decided to follow with a pretty common design trope for Hermes in the epic fandom where you just don't show his eyes. And honestly, I think it really works for him. I think it makes Hermes feel like a mysterious vagabond that is both unknown unknowable and otherworldly in nature. You know, eyes are the windows to the soul, and obstructing that means you can never really tell what he's thinking or feeling, which suits him because he's a god, and not just a god, but a cunning trickster god. So he's super unpredictable. And it's definitely not just me, but a lot of people find concealed facial features really attractive since it leaves more to the imagination, which is always going to appeal to a wider demographic than anything that can actually be depicted, because what you imagine will be what suits your personal preferences best. And I don't know, maybe I'm just not cool like that with Hermes, so he's not letting me capture him in his entirety. But one thing I did know for sure was that I definitely wanted my Hermes to have short, curly hair. This is already how he is traditionally portrayed in his statues and paintings, and that's just always how I've pictured him when I imagine him off the top of my head too, because apparently I think about him a lot. The main reference I used for his hair is actually Troy himself. His hair is exactly the style, texture, and color I picture for Hermes, and yes, I do think he was the perfect casting for Hermes overall. And if you want to know which Hermes had the worst casting, it's obviously Lin-Manuel Miranda for the Percy Jackson series. Boo me all you want, you're not gonna shake my unwavering annoyance towards Lin-Manuel Miranda and his nasally little voice. He was the reason I couldn't get into Hamilton. Once I was happy with the overall shape and volume of his hair, I moved on to the wings that Hermes is often depicted with. The god of messengers is often shown wearing a pair of winged sandals and a winged cap. Now, whether the wings are part of him or his sandal and cap, that tends to change based on the artist and the interpretation, but to me personally, I like the idea that his head wings at least are a part of him, and a symbol of his gifts as the god of speed and swiftness, as well as his cleverness, his quick thinking. So for his cap, I wanted to do something similar to the helmet he wore in Blood of Zeus, which I honestly think has the best Hermes design out there. Like, sure, I would have preferred if he had short hair instead of this long braid, but otherwise, I think he's perfect. Personality-wise, that's a different story, because they don't really give him much of a personality to begin with, or any of the other gods really, for that matter, but we're going strictly off the design, okay? I wanted it to be sleek and streamlined, something that would look good in motion. While I did want it to be a helmet, I was also quite fond of him having a wide brim cap, which is more in line with the petasos, which was widely used by rural people of antiquity, and one of Hermes' signature items, you could say. I think this also serves as both a good homage to him being the god of shepherds and the god of travel. Basically someone who is outdoors a lot, so he would wear gear that would protect him from the elements, even if he doesn't really need it. Fun fact, in the myths, Hephaestus was the one to give Hermes his winged sandals, and I think that is such a cute story that demonstrates the bond Hermes has with his brothers, which is actually very strong and positive. We'll talk about that a bit more later, but for now, because the winged sandals aren't the only gift Hermes received from his brother that became an unmistakable, very distinct symbol for him. The caduceus, his signature staff, is another one, but we'll save that for when we talk about his myths. For now, let's talk about his outfit. I knew for certain that I wanted Hermes to have a scarf or cloak of some sort to go along with his hat and really hammer home that vagabond vibe, mostly to demonstrate that he's an outdoorsy person, but also because he was explicitly stated in the myths to have a special cloak that lets him turn invisible. I don't think a lot of people know this, because the only time I've ever seen Hermes' invisibility cloak showcased in modern media is in Blood of Zeus. So yeah, he does have an invisibility cloak, in case you didn't know. And speaking of Blood of Zeus, there was one piece of Hermes illustration that had a particularly gorgeous iteration of his cloak, and I'm not sure if it's scrapped concept art or fan art, but it's particularly pleasing to the eye. I really like the asymmetry, which I think is a fun contrast to the scarf I did for Apollo, which is very symmetrical, so I tried to emulate that for a little bit before I realized I would be covering up a lot of his figure, which I really didn't want to do. But what I did know for a fact I wanted to do was shape the ends of his cloak into feather-like shapes to be reminiscent of roosters. Why? Because I am 100% convinced he sent that rooster to break my door, so I am going full rooster for my main inspiration. Because as a god of fertility, the phallus is one of his major symbols, so the rooster symbolism is also a cock joke I'm cleverly and discreetly incorporating for free. You're welcome. But because I was struggling a bit with the design for his cloak, I decided to focus on his sandals first, which I did feel a bit daunted by because they're such important and distinct aspects of his characterization. I wanted to do them right. I looked up a few references and tried to draw out a general shape first before adding in the wings, which I was the most excited for, before finally going back and trying again with his clothes. I did eventually ditch the cloak for a stylish scarf though, because I think it's more dynamic while allowing me to show off more underneath, and I was really happy with this shape. Moving on to his chiton, I followed through with the asymmetry to match his scarf, and I also decided to give him a belt just for extra ornamentation. I got the idea to do a wing shape that would go around his waist, and I really liked how that ended up looking. But because there was a bit of a gap in between the two wings, a bit of an empty space you could say, I decided to fill that space with a gem in the shape of a tortoiseshell, which is another one of his sacred animals. After that, I readjusted the shape and length of his chiton, particularly the shoulder straps and hem, added a bit more details to his waist area, and I was finally ready to add in his messenger bag. Because what is a messenger god without his bag of letters and parchment? In his statues, he would occasionally be depicted holding a purse or a bag in his hands, and that was my main inspiration for this inclusion. But for the bag itself, I mostly referenced Supergiant's Hades' version of Hermes, which I thought had a really fun design. Now, this secondary pose is really where this design will shine, because everything will just emphasize his line of motion and dynamic movement. With his scarf, bag, and feather tassels billowing behind him, his wings fully extended, it'll definitely make for a lot of interesting shots. It'll be a nightmare to animate, but as a comic, there's a lot of fun things we could use to imply movement, I think. For the colors, I knew I had to give Hermes tan skin because he travels a lot. He's very much an outdoors person, an outdoor boyfriend, if you will. Though I do imagine his skin lightening when he's in the underworld where he doesn't get any sunlight at all. I've personally always pictured Hermes with dark hair, though I tend to lean towards brown over black for him. If I were to depict his eyes, I picture him having either green or blue eyes, but I think I lean more towards green, or possibly hazel, and I think that would be pretty too. For his clothes, just like what I did for Apollo, I came up with 2 color variations because I am indecisive. So, my original idea was to color him like the exact rooster that broke my door, and no, I'm never gonna let it go. And no, I'm never gonna let it go, which was this white gold color. It looked heavenly and divine, which suits Hermes as an Olympian and herald of the gods. But then I also wanted to try a darker, earthier color scheme that would feel more at home on the mortal realm or the underworld. So I also tried the classic rooster colors from Mi Bakso bowls, which you will only understand the cultural significance of if you are Indonesian. We're doing cultural exchange here, people. And hey, speaking of cultural exchange, if Hermes was really out there and he made it all the way to Indonesia, he would 100% have a scooter and be an absolute menace on it on the road. So yeah, now let me tell you about some of his myths. So, according to some versions of the myth, the caduceus was a staff that Hermes made himself when he saw 2 snakes fighting, and I'm pretty sure this was when he was still like a 1-day-old baby, and he stuck a long stick between them to stop them from killing each other. Therefore, the caduceus is a symbol of Hermes' domains in mediation, problem solving, and conflict resolution, not medicine or healthcare, which he his staff often gets mistaken for, because I guess it bears a very close similarity to the Asclepius rod, which we went over in my Apollo video. But the Asclepius rod is the proper rod to represent medicine, because it is the rod of Asclepius, the god of medicine, whereas the caduceus is Hermes' rod, and it refers more about conflict resolution. It was used by like the medics of, I think, the US Army. I'm not sure what it is. I'll put it up, which sector of violence that they were associated with, but anyway, it's not correct. The caduceus is not meant to symbolize anything to do with health or healthcare. But in other versions, the caduceus was a gift from Apollo as a gesture of goodwill after he forgave Hermes for stealing 50 of his cows and sacrificing 2 of them. And you're probably like, wait, huh? So let's talk about my absolute favorite Greek myth ever, shall we? Which happens to be the Homeric hymn to Hermes, HHH, if you will, which talks about the birth of Hermes. So as we've established, Hermes was born in a cave in Arcadia. Now, on the day that he was born, after being left alone by his mother for like a few hours, Hermes snuck out of his crib and began causing mischief. Yes, as a 1-day-old baby, not only could Hermes walk, he could also talk. And the first thing he did with those abilities, well, he stole 50 cows from Apollo, of course. Not only was he able to manage a herd of 50 cows by himself, he was also clever enough to recognize that he was committing theft and knew that he had to cover up his crimes, and did so by making the cows walk backwards and literally inventing sandals by tying twigs to the bottom of his feet to hide his footprints. He hid the cows in a cave near the river Alpheus and sacrificed 2 of them to the gods. He sacrificed all the meat and didn't keep any for himself. And to hide the evidence of his crimes, he started a fire by rubbing 2 sticks together, thus inventing both fire sticks and fire, and burned the animal carcasses and threw his sandals in the river. Somewhere around this time, he also killed a tortoise and used its shell to invent the very first lyre, which was also the very first stringed instrument in the Homeric hymn to Hermes. Why did I say it like that? I don't know. Homer writes, when Hermes saw the mountain tortoise, the luck-bringing son of God. The luck-bringing son of God. I guess correct. Yeah, Zeus is the god in question. The luck-bringing son of Zeus laughed and said, "An omen of great luck for me so soon. I do not slight it. Hail, comrade of the feast, lovely in shape, sounding at the dance. With joy I meet you. Where got you that rich god for covering, that spangled shell, a tortoise living in the mountains? But I will take and carry you within. You shall help me, and I will do you no disgrace. Though first of all you must profit me. It is better to be at home. Harm may come out of doors. Living, you shall be a spell against mischievous witchcraft. But if you die, you shall make sweetest song." Thus speaking, he took up the tortoise in both hands and went back into the house, carrying his charming toy. Then he cut off its limbs and scooped out the marrow of the mountain tortoise with a scoop of gray iron. As a swift thought darts through the heart of a man when thronging cares haunt him, or as bright glances flash from the eye, so glorious Hermes planned both thought and deed at once. He cut stalks of reed to measure and fix them, fastening their ends across the back and through the shell of the tortoise, and then stretched the ox hide all over it by his skill. Also he put in the horns and fitted a crosspiece upon the 2 of them, and stretched 7 strings of sheep gut. But when he had made it, he proved each string in turn with the key, as he held the lovely thing. At the touch of his hand it sounded marvelously, and as he tried it, the god sang sweet random snatches, even as youths bandy taunts at festivals. He sang of Zeus, the son of Cronos, and neat-shod Maia, the converse which they had before it, and the comradeship of love, telling all the glorious tale of his own begetting. Yeah, yes he would. Seems random, I know. But that's just his Gemini energy, okay? There is a method to his madness, so just bear with him. By evening, he returned home, wrapped himself in his swaddling clothes, and slipped back into his cradle, feigning innocence. Because in case you forgot, he was literally just a day old. Unfortunately, his mom caught him. Once again from a snippet of the HHH, Hermes went hurriedly to his cradle, wrapping his swaddling clothes about his shoulders as though he were a feeble babe, and lay playing with the covering about his knees. But at his left hand he kept close his sweetest lyre. But the god did not pass unseen by the goddess his mother, but she said to him, "How now, you rogue? Whence come you back so at night time, you that wear shamelessness as a garment? And now I surely believe the son of Leto will soon have you forth out of doors with unbreakable cords at your ribs, or you will live a rogue's life in the glens robbing by wiles. Go to then, your father got you to be a great warrior to mortal men and deathless gods." Such a mother thing to say, not gonna lie. Then Hermes answered her with crafty words. "Mother, why do you seek to frighten me like a feeble child whose heart knows few words of blame, a fearful babe that fears its mother's scolding? Nay, but I will try whatever plan is best, and so feed myself and you continually. We will not be content to remain here, as you bid, alone of all the gods unfeed with offerings and prayers. Better to live in fellowship with the deathless gods continually, rich, wealthy, and enjoying stores of grain, than to sit always in a gloomy cave. And as regards honor, I too will enter upon the right that Apollo has. If my father will not give it to me, I will seek, and I am able, to be a prince of robbers. And if Leto's most why is it so funny to me? And if Leto's most glorious son shall seek me out, I think another and a greater loss will befall him. For I will go to Pytho to break into his great house, and I will plunder therefrom splendid tripods and cauldrons and gold and plenty of bright iron and much apparel. And you will see, and you shall see it if you will." I don't know what I'm saying as I read this. I'm just reading it. It doesn't have to make sense to me. It's okay. So yeah, Hermes was a little bastard from the moment he was born, and we love him for it. The next morning, Apollo noticed that some of his cattle were missing and came looking for them. Despite Hermes' efforts to hide his crime, Apollo managed to see through his tricks, because he is the god of truth. And when he discovered the fate of his cattle, he came to confront his half-brother. Apollo threatened to throw Hermes into Tartarus and imprison him there if he didn't give back the cattle, but Hermes literally pulled the "I just a baby" card and wouldn't admit to his crimes, and the specific image of Apollo jostling an infant and threatening to send him to literal super hell over a minor inconvenience is endlessly amusing to me, and I love that for him as well. Because to be fair, Hermes was absolutely a little shit, and did also threaten to rob him blind if he didn't get his way. So who's the real villain here? Because I'm Apollo's #1 defense attorney. I'm always going to stand up for him. What am I doing? But anyway, they took their case to Zeus, and he more or less just found it funny, so he told Hermes to give Apollo back his cows. Hermes showed Apollo where the cows were, but before Apollo could take them away, Hermes picked up the lyre he had created and began to play it. And of course, Apollo, being the god of music, was completely enraptured by this new instrument and sound that Hermes had created, so he asked Hermes to give it to him. Hermes then suggested a deal. In exchange for the instrument, Apollo would trade his cattle and the position of divine herdsman, and Apollo agreed. Zeus confirmed the pact and decreed that Hermes would become the messenger of the gods, and so Apollo gave him the caduceus, which is also known as the herald's wand. And then after that, Hermes invented the panpipes, so he had his own instrument to play. So Hermes has actually invented 2 musical instruments, which also makes him the god of instrument crafting, I think. I forget the specific wording. So yeah, that's kind of part of the story of the caduceus and also Hermes in general. But I like to think that Hermes probably came up with the concept of caduceus when he saw those 2 snakes, and Apollo made the wand as a memento of that, I guess. So it's both. It's both to me. There was a post on r/Greek mythology that said Hermes stole the cattle and made the lyre at the same time, specifically because he wanted to get Apollo's attention and befriend him, while also proving himself to Zeus. And there's two ways to interpret this. One, it's just a classic case of younger siblings doing something stupid to get their older sibling to hang out or pay attention to them. Or two, it was a strategic and ambitious power play, a bid for immortality and a place on Olympus. And Apollo was his chosen victim to do that. It honestly could have also been both, and it worked. And there's no hard feelings between Apollo and Hermes either, because they have been canonically besties since then. Another myth that demonstrates Hermes' cleverness and helpful nature was when Zeus sent him to retrieve Io, who was one of Hera's priestesses that he wanted to get down and dirty with, but because he got caught, he tried to hide his actions by turning Io into a cow. Hera asked for the cow, who she knew was a girl the whole time, to be given to her as a gift, and Zeus complied to keep up his deceit. She placed Io in a grove and had her guarded by a 100-eyed monster called Argus Panoptes, which, personally, I would have been really grateful for if I knew Zeus was after me. But this also made it impossible for Hermes to steal Io back, because Argus was able to make his eyes sleep in shifts, so he could constantly watch Io. And this is where those panpipes come in. Hermes basically disguised himself as a goat herd, sat down by Argus, and gently played his panpipes until all of Argus's eyes closed in sleep. Once he had done this, Hermes took up his weapon, a harp, not that harp, but a harp with an E, and beheaded the monster, earning his name Argeiphontes. R.I.P. Argus Panoptes, he was just doing his job, and I'm pretty sure Io was just chilling too. I mean, she had no responsibilities, no obligations, had a whole piece of land to herself with unlimited food, and a personal bodyguard. I would argue that that was a pretty good life for cows and girls. Okay, one last Hermes myth, because this is one I also really liked, and it also talks about the bond he has with another brother of his, Dionysus. So I'm not going to go too deeply into the lore of Dionysus's birth, but essentially, Dionysus was the second child of Zeus to be born from Zeus himself, and the way that happened was, let's say through some unfortunate circumstances, Dionysus's mother, Semele, ended up incinerated, and Hermes had to cut his unborn brother out of his mother's womb, which would be the second emergency cesarean section ever performed, depending on whether or not Asclepius had been born at the time. I like to think Apollo probably taught him how to do this after his incident with Coronis. But anyway, because Dionysus was extremely premature, he had to be stitched to Zeus's thigh, where he spent the rest of his perinatal life, and when he was born the second time from Zeus's thigh, which was what earned Dionysus the epithet twice-born, Dionysus was entrusted to Hermes, who became his protector and caregiver, safeguarding him from Hera's wrath. There is actually a statue of Hermes holding the infant Dionysus, and is titled as such, which I think is really sweet. In the myth, Hermes took Dionysus away to live with his aunt and uncle from his mother's side, who then raised Dionysus as a girl to hide him from Hera. It didn't work, unfortunately, but things worked out for Dionysus eventually, in the end, after much struggle. And you would think with the amount of times that Hermes inadvertently interferes in Hera's plans to enact vengeance on Zeus's lovers and children, he'd be the child she hates the most, right? Well, in reality, Hermes is actually the illegitimate child she dislikes the least. In fact, I even dare say she was quite fond of him. I distinctly remember someone talking about a ritual Hermes performed or some sort of gift he made for Hera. Or at least it was a gift that made me think, oh, that was probably, for Hera, and that probably made her happy. But I can't seem to find what I was thinking or remembering. And whenever I look it up, the only answer I could find was that he was just so charming and clever that he was quite popular with the Olympians, so much so that even Hera liked him. And I don't blame them. He's a cool guy. He's an awesome dude. He's just a chill guy. Oh god, he's must bro. Do you know must bro? Never mind. But yeah, it's really easy to like Hermes because he is just super helpful. Aside from helping Odysseus fight against Circe and escape Calypso's island, he also helped Priam, king of Troy, travel safely into the Greek camp during the Trojan War to plead with Achilles for the body of his son Hector. And along with Athena, Hermes also gave Perseus all the equipment he needed to slay the Gorgon Medusa. But in general, I think Hermes, Apollo, and Dionysus probably have the strongest brotherly bond among Zeus's sons. They may have different mothers, but they have the same passion for pleasure. In fact, the three of them are also known as the Brothers of Pleasure because Apollo has the epithet Charopios, which means he who brings joy, while Hermes and Dionysus both have the epithet Charidotes, which means giver of joy. Joy here being, of the promiscuous kind. In any case, that's Hermes. Let me know what you thought of this video, or if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, and if so, which god or goddess you'd like to hear about next. Thank you so much for hanging out in my channel for a while. I hope your skin didn't get too pruny. Big shout out to my lovely pond dwellers on Patreon. If you want to become a pond dweller and get extra perks like a free commission from me, join my Patreon. If you want to see more from me, then please follow me on all my social media. If you want to submit fan art or chat with me, join my Discord server. And if you want more of my stories, check out my Wild Words series here on YouTube because that will make me really happy. All the links are in my description, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye!